I've never thought that family could become such a complex concept. You grow up believing it's this unbreakable bond, a safety net, until one day it suddenly isn't. When my mom told my daughter that she wasn't family anymore, it was like the ground beneath me crumbled. Evelyn had flown 5 hours just to be there for their wedding anniversary, and they wouldn't even let her in. I didn't scream or cause a scene. Instead, I acted, knowing that actions sometimes speak louder than words. 30 minutes later, my parents were caught up in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. But to understand how we got to that point, we need to go back a little, just not too far. I remember standing beneath this decorative arch made of fake hydrangeas. I was scanning the driveway for the 6th time in 10 minutes, trying to keep my composure. My husband Graham was juggling 2 half-full paper cups of lukewarm punch while whispering to our youngest about whether or not she could take her shoes off. Meanwhile, our son was leaning against a folding chair in that way preteens do, signaling that he didn't really belong with us. And there I was, checking the time yet again. "She's cutting it close," I murmured to myself. "Maybe the flight got held up," Graham said, sipping from his cup, which contained what could only be described as the least celebratory drink imaginable. I nodded, but my stomach was already in knots, a strange sensation of feeling both light and heavy at the same time. Evelyn had been so excited. She had picked out her dress 3 weeks prior and even had it dry cleaned. For a college student, that's akin to a love letter. She packed a small gift bag in her carry-on, which held a handmade photo frame she had custom etched herself. Her flight was scheduled to land just before noon, and the ceremony was set to start at 2 p.m. She promised she'd take an Uber straight from the airport. "I'll be there, Mom," she assured me. "It's their big day." I tried to focus on those words, but as time slipped away, anxiety crept in. By 2 p.m, sweat was beginning to soak through the sides of my sleeveless dress, and I was checking my phone every 20 seconds. No messages, no calls, no sign of Evelyn. I found my mother near the back patio, repositioning candles like she was orchestrating a scene from a drama rather than hosting a vow renewal. My dad was beside her, holding a clipboard as though someone might attempt to rewrite the vows. "Hey," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I know it's getting late, but can we wait just a few more minutes? Evelyn hasn't arrived yet. She's probably just around the corner." My mom turned to me, as composed as always. She told me Evelyn had already been there. I blinked, confused. What did she mean? Evelyn had come a little early, she explained, brushing away an imaginary speck from the tablecloth. "A bit before noon," she thought. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when everything begins to spin out of control. "Then where is she? Is she inside?" I asked. That's when my dad chimed in, as if he'd rehearsed the line. They had told her it wasn't the right day for her to be there. At first, the words didn't make sense. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, hoping I'd misheard. My mom said Evelyn wasn't really part of the family, not in the same way. I repeated her words, waiting for the punchline, the reassurance that it was all a misunderstanding. Surely they'd say it was a joke, that Evelyn was welcome and loved, but that moment never came. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice thin and shaky. My dad insisted Evelyn understood that she hadn't argued and had been very respectful. Of course she had been. Evelyn had always been too respectful, too composed, always careful not to make others uncomfortable even when it meant she was the one being hurt. My legs felt weak. "You turned her away," I said, struggling to get the words out. "She flew 5 hours, paid for the ticket herself, and skipped her roommate's birthday just to be here." "And you?" My mom interrupted, saying they didn't mean anything hurtful by it. They just wanted to keep things simple and intimate. There were 87 people on the RSVP list, but sure, intimate. Graham must have sensed something was off because he came up behind me. I turned to him, then to my kids, and finally back to my parents. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, but something inside me snapped, like the thinnest wire finally giving in. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady but determined. When I look back at that day, it's like watching a film replaying over and over in my mind. I can still see my mom's eyes widening in disbelief when I said it. It's not like I didn't expect that reaction. I'd been biting my tongue for years, holding back so much, and that day, it all just came out. I told the kids to grab their things, trying to keep my voice steady. Graham, he didn't need any explanation. He just knew. He dumped the punch, picked up the bags, and nodded. We left without a word, and I made sure not to glance back. Stepping outside, the air hit me hard. It was suffocating, like it was punishing me for finally speaking up. I remember my hands shaking as I tried to reach Evelyn again. It went straight to voicemail, which was our usual routine, but it stung more that day. I texted her, hoping for a response, but nothing. I just stood there, holding my phone like it could somehow give me the answer I needed. Graham, always the calm one, got the kids into the car and then stood by me, offering silent support. He didn't say she would call, but I could feel it in his presence. And then, just minutes later, a message from her popped up on my screen. A simple, "Are you free now?" I called her back instantly, my heart lodged in my throat. She answered after a couple of rings. I asked her where she was, trying to sound normal, but her voice gave her away. It was small, scared. Evelyn didn't want to ruin the day for me, she said. She thought I should enjoy the event without her problems weighing me down. But hearing her say that they had decided she wasn't part of the family anymore, it was like a punch to the gut. The silence between us was anything but empty. It was heavy, filled with things unsaid. I asked her where she was, and when she mentioned a cafe down the road, I told her we were on our way. Graham was already backing the car out, ready to go. We didn't say much on the drive. I didn't cry, didn't raise my voice, but inside I was a mess, replaying things over and over. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and made a call I hadn't anticipated. Within half an hour, my parents were shouting, not understanding the fear and hurt they had caused. Growing up, I wanted to believe they were just imperfect, like most parents. Not mean, just a bit blunt and stuck in their ways. They were the type to forget your birthday, but then hand you a $20 bill with a shrug, as if that would make it right. I never thought they could be cruel until I heard Evelyn say those words, echoing something I'd heard myself years ago. I was the middle child, the one who never quite fit in. You know the type, old enough to be blamed for things, but too young to be taken seriously. My brother Colin was the achiever, always bringing home trophies and awards. My younger sister Ruth was the baby, the one everyone doted on. And me? I was just there, filling space in family photos without adding much meaning. Looking back, the signs were always there, small things that seemed insignificant but added up over time. On birthdays, Ruth would get handmade cards with glitter, Colin a cake with his favorite football team's logo. And me? I got a plain sheet cake with the wrong name on it. When I pointed it out, they brushed it off, saying it was just cake, telling me not to be difficult. That phrase became a regular refrain in our house. But it was never just about the cake. It was about everything. I must have been around 12 or 13 when I first heard them say it. I'd made a new friend, Maya, who was bold and different. She wore black nail polish and talked about becoming a tattoo artist. My parents couldn't stand her or her family, always muttering about not knowing what kind of people they are, as if they were dangerous, not just different. But I kept seeing Maya, and then one Saturday morning I woke up to an empty house. I assumed they were out running errands, but they'd actually gone to the amusement park we'd planned to visit for weeks. I wasn't invited. It wasn't until later, when Ruth accidentally let it slip, that I found out. I asked my mom why, through tears, and she just laughed it off, saying they didn't feel like I was part of the family that day. Everyone chuckled along, as if it was a harmless joke. At dinner, with my eyes still red and a plate of leftover hot dogs in front of me, I asked if she really meant it. She brushed it off again, but the damage was done. When I sit down to talk about this, It feels like I'm opening a box that I kept hidden away, but it's time to let it out. I remember a moment when someone told me I needed to think about my behavior. I was made to feel like I had embarrassed myself and that I should consider how my actions had affected others. And I did. I apologized because I believed them. For years, I carried this belief that maybe I had overreacted and perhaps I had even deserved it. It took me a long time to realize that wasn't true. Years after this, I met Aaron. I was 22, and he was the first person who made me feel like I could be myself. Aaron had grown up in the foster system and moved around a lot, but he was one of the most stable people I knew. He was the kind of person who would fix a broken chair without being asked and could cook real meals that didn't just come from a box. He was kind, genuinely so. But my parents couldn't see any of that. They were fixated on the fact that Aaron didn't have a family in the conventional sense. I remember the first dinner we had with them. My dad asked, "Where's his family?" And I explained that he didn't have any. My mom just tilted her head like she was puzzled, but to them, no family meant something was wrong, something suspicious. They never said it directly, but it was clear they didn't think he was suitable. He wasn't our kind. Aaron was soft-spoken, worked with his hands, and didn't have a degree from a prestigious university. What he did have, though, was heart, and for me, that was more than enough. But apparently it wasn't enough for them. When we decided to get married, my mom said, "Just promise me one thing. You won't expect us to pretend this is a good idea." I didn't know how to respond without losing my temper, so I said nothing. They came to the wedding, but it was like they were attending a funeral. When Evelyn was born, things softened for me, at least. But for them, not at all. Evelyn looked so much like Aaron, big brown eyes and a quiet curiosity. She wasn't a fussy baby. She just observed the world around her thoughtfully. My parents, though, kept their distance. They didn't have to say anything. Their actions spoke volumes. One Christmas, they brought personalized ornaments for all the grandkids. Evelyn's was a generic store-bought one with just the word joy in block letters. My mom said, "Well, we weren't sure what she was into." Evelyn was 4, and what she was into was stickers and grilled cheese sandwiches, but they couldn't bother to see that. I tried talking to them about it once, but my mom brushed it off, telling me not to read into everything and that I was always looking for problems. After a while, I just stopped trying. Aaron and I eventually divorced. It wasn't a dramatic split. We just grew in different directions. He moved to another city, but he still visits Evelyn regularly. We co-parent better than some married couples I know. My parents, though, acted like they had won some kind of battle. My mom said while sipping her tea, "I suppose we all make mistakes, but you've really grown from it." It stung because it felt like she was saying Evelyn was part of a mistake I had made. Then I met Graham, my current husband. He's steady, funny, middle class, from a town that my parents approved of. He went to college and wears polos without irony. My parents loved him immediately. My dad even said at dinner one night, "We're so proud of you. You really turned your life around." I almost choked on my drink because it felt like they saw Evelyn as a wrong turn I had taken. Over time, it became more obvious. Evelyn's half-siblings got real attention, real gifts, and genuine warmth. Evelyn got polite smiles and last-minute invitations. Sometimes I could see she noticed the difference, but she never said anything. She just quietly tucked those feelings away, as if folding them and placing them on a shelf. It was my sister Ruth who started to change once she had kids. She began to notice the way our parents leaned on me and dismissed me. She apologized quietly and started reaching out more, inviting me to things and offering to babysit. She helped without waiting for me to ask. She said it wasn't fair, the way they treated me growing up, and that she saw it now. We didn't talk about it all the time, but knowing she saw it meant a lot. On the other hand, Colin, my brother, was still the golden child. He worked in finance and married someone who called herself classy in her wedding vows. He always sided with our parents. Once he told me, "They're old, just let them be who they are." That was hard to hear, like I should just accept it. When my parents announced they were renewing their vows for their anniversary, they asked all three of us siblings to contribute equally. I paid my share because that's what you do. I remember the day vividly, like a scene from a film I can't turn away from. I had sent in photos for the slideshow, and I'd even helped with the playlist. Evelyn was included in the group email, and that meant the world to her. She was thrilled, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that maybe this time would be different. My parents were older now. Maybe they had softened. Maybe they were finally ready to see the difference between parenting and punishment. Maybe they would treat all the grandkids the same. I clung to that hope. But then the reality hit hard. When I called Ruth from the car, her voice was breathless. I could hear it. She was there. At the party, but they had told me she wasn't going to make it. They lied to me. It felt like a punch to the gut. Ruth was silent for a moment, and then Moira's voice came through, filled with disbelief. They told Evelyn she wasn't family. I could hear Ruth exhale slowly, like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. I told her she didn't have to say anything. I just needed her to know what happened. There was a pause before she replied, her voice low, promising to talk to James and figure something out. I hung up and stared out the windshield, feeling the weight of it all. That's when the realization hit me. This wasn't a new betrayal, it was just another episode of a story that had been replaying for years. This time, though, I wasn't the one apologizing, and that was new. I sat silently in the car, and so did Graham. The kids were in the back seat, absorbed in a tablet, the volume too low to hear. The silence was unsettling, like the eerie calm after something catastrophic has happened, and you're left to piece together the wreckage. We had walked out of my parents' wedding anniversary. No, we had left as a family, in front of 80 people, give or take. Old coworkers, ex-neighbors, all eyes on us. We stood up, gathered our things, and exited without turning back. I kept questioning myself over and over. What have I done? The answers came in waves, each one different. First, I abandoned my parents' big day. Then, no, I made a statement. And then again, what kind of daughter does that? Finally, I settled on this. One who has a daughter of her own. When we finally reached the cafe, Evelyn was sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of something that was probably cold by then. She looked up as we approached, blinking slowly as if unsure we were really there. Her eyes were red but dry. She greeted us quietly as if she hadn't just been cut out of her grandparents' lives. I hugged her before I could stop myself, not a polite hug, but a desperate one. She didn't pull away. We ordered fries and drinks, but nobody touched them. We just sat there in a shared silence until my phone buzzed. I didn't check the screen, I just knew. Graham asked gently who it was. My brother. I braced myself and picked up the call. Moira's voice came through, full of disbelief and anger. Colin, you just left at Mom and Dad's anniversary. Are you completely out of your mind? Evelyn was turned away at the door. I knew she thought Evelyn was being dramatic, but I knew the truth. No, Colin, I know how they are. He scoffed so loudly I had to move the phone away from my ear. This is insane. You're blowing up decades of family tradition over some misunderstanding. She flew 5 hours. They told her she wasn't family. Colin kept at it, trying to guilt-trip me, telling me how devastated Mom and Dad were. They were in tears. I said good. That stunned him into silence, and then he accused me of trying to ruin the family. Colin, I said calmly, if one person can ruin your big day, it wasn't a big day. It was a performance. I hung up in the middle of his rant, my hand shaking. Evelyn reached over and placed her fingers gently on mine. A light tap. I looked at her. She didn't say anything. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mom. Graham reached for the phone, telling me not to answer. But I had to. Mom's voice was sharp, accusing me of humiliating them in front of everyone they knew. I told her maybe she should have thought of that before slamming the door in her granddaughter's face. Her response was defensive, insisting they didn't slam the door and accusing me of being dramatic. "Right?" I said. "You just told her she wasn't family and watched her walk away." There was a pause, and then she started with the guilt trip. "You've made your point. Now come back." "No, Moira, don't do this. It's your parents' anniversary. People are asking questions. I'm sure they are." Her voice sharpened. I remember the moment when everything changed. It was an ordinary day, or at least it started that way. I was sitting there, phone in hand, talking to Ruth. She had just told me she was leaving too. It hit me like a wave. I hung up, and 2 minutes later, a text from Ruth appeared. She confirmed they were leaving. I showed the message to Graham. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. Evelyn leaned over to see. We weren't alone in this. Others felt it too. It wasn't just about what we did, it was about what it meant. We didn't keep silent. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We stood up and declared it wasn't okay. Not anymore. 10 minutes later, Ruth and her husband appeared at the cafe, their kids in tow. They looked like us, stunned, exhausted, a bit disheveled. We pushed 2 tables together, but words were scarce. The waitress gave us a look like we were intruders at a solemn event, which, in a sense, we were. Evelyn handed her little cousin a napkin to clean off some ketchup. She was present, attentive, the big sister I never had the chance to be. Ruth noticed my mutterings about Evelyn handling things better than I ever did. My phone buzzed again, a message from my cousin Mara, who was still at the venue. It was chaos. Colin attempted to run a slideshow, but the screen froze. People were leaving. My mom tried to explain it away as a misunderstanding over the microphone during appetizers. I showed Ruth the message, and she couldn't help but snort into her tea. We sat there, still and silent, as the world spun around the aftermath of our rebellion. Ruth voiced what I felt. We were used to fixing things, but this time we didn't. I leaned back, staring out the window as life continued outside. A couple walked by, hand in hand, laughing at something that didn't matter to us. We hadn't ruined their day. They had. Later that night, another update came. The vow renewal went ahead. Some stayed, mostly out of politeness or for the open bar. The front rows were half empty during the vows. There was clapping, but it was the kind you hear when someone ends a dull slideshow. Not joyful, not heartfelt, just awkward and obligatory. 3 days passed. Not much time, but enough for silence to become deafening, for bills to start arriving. Everyone pretended nothing had happened until the financial realities set in. I hadn't spoken to my parents, Colin, or even Ruth, who texted once to confirm we weren't paying. I simply replied, "Correct." The vow renewal hadn't been prepaid. My parents wanted to do it right this time, with all the trimmings, a champagne wall, a roaming violinist, a wedding planner who used terms like statement florals without irony. We were each supposed to cover a third, me, Ruth, and Colin. But now the math had changed, and Colin was about to find out. The voicemail came at 7:42 a.m. before my first cup of coffee. Colin was furious. "Moira, what the hell is this? You think you can skip out on the bill? We made a family agreement. You don't just walk out on Mom and Dad's day and leave me with the invoices." He paused, then said, "Grow up." I listened to it twice, letting it sink in. Then I muted my phone and flipped a pancake. Evelyn wanted pancakes that morning. She was still staying with us. Her flight back was tomorrow. I had asked my professor for an extension, explaining I needed to be with family. He understood. By midday, the panic arrived in person. My parents knocked on the door like they were selling something. My mom held something in her hand, maybe a folder, maybe a peace offering. My dad looked tense but dressed for dignity. He always wore a blazer when he wanted to seem reasonable. Graham went to open the door. I remember the day it all started to unravel. My parents showed up unexpectedly, and I could tell something was off. They wanted to talk, claiming it was just to clear the air. My mom, always sweet on the surface, and my dad, nodding along, pretended like it was no big deal, but I knew better. They wanted to talk to Evelyn, my daughter. They thought she might have misunderstood something, I called her down, and she stood there, arms crossed, looking at me. I told her she didn't have to do anything she didn't want to. She simply nodded, ready to face whatever was coming her way. I moved to the kitchen, but stayed close. I didn't want to intrude, but I also didn't want to leave her alone with them. They started gently, as they always did. Apologies that felt more like excuses. We didn't mean to hurt you. It was a hectic day. We love you. All of it sounded hollow. Evelyn, they said, you misunderstood. My mom's voice caught when Evelyn said they'd told her she wasn't family. That's not what we said, my mom protested. But Evelyn remembered. She pointed out how they'd decided she wasn't part of the family anymore. My dad tried to backtrack, saying they meant close family, but the damage was done. Evelyn had flown 5 hours, bought a dress, and they didn't even let her into the building. My mom tried to justify it, saying it wasn't fair, but neither was what they'd done. There was a long pause, one that seemed to stretch forever. Evelyn finally spoke. She wasn't mad, she said. She was just done. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of pride in her. 5 minutes later, they left, the door closing behind them. That night, Evelyn sat beside me. She said she didn't want to keep trying for people who wouldn't try back. I was stunned by her strength. I admitted that I used to fall for their words too. But she shook her head, telling me I didn't. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat there, silently acknowledging the end of something that had never really been there. By the next morning, the fallout began. Aunt Liz called Ruth, saying my mom claimed we'd ruined the anniversary over a misunderstanding. Uncle Greg sent a message, his way of checking in. Colin, my brother, went around complaining about having to cover the event costs because he thought his sisters had lost their minds. Then Ruth texted me. The will had changed. Colin was the sole heir now. I told her to let him have it. I was done trying to buy my way into a family that never wanted me. I meant it. No dramatic goodbyes, no final explosions. Just silence and boundaries that no longer shifted. Years have passed, and we haven't spoken to my parents or Colin since. Evelyn graduated last spring. She returned to the city, found a job she loves, surrounded herself with friends who feel more like family than the one she left behind. Her studio apartment is cozy, and she never mentions her grandparents. I doubt she even remembers them anymore. A few months back, Colin appeared at our door unannounced. Graham answered while I stayed on the couch. Colin looked worn out, more than just physically. He asked if we planned to resume supporting Mom and Dad. Apparently, their lifestyle wasn't as affordable as they'd pretended. Since we stopped helping, Colin had been covering everything himself. They'd promised him everything: the house, savings, legacy. But there was nothing left. They'd overspent for years, leaving nothing but debt. The house was mortgaged to the hilt, and the inheritance was a fantasy. They'd lied to him as well. He left after an argument I didn't witness and don't intend to ask about. Last I heard, he cut them off too. It's ironic how they pushed Evelyn away for not being family and ended up with none at all. But I'm okay with that. I chose my daughter, I chose self-respect, and I'd make those choices again. So tell me, did I go too far or just far enough? Let me know what you think. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for notifications.